Welcome to another episode of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. A progressive and populist insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining show on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people, and not just the elite few. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters from his mid-Michigan attic, it's time for the award-winning Pat Johnston. It's all yours, Pat.
Yeah! Welcome to another edition of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, back from a little spring break trip to Arizona where it was comfortable and sunny, I will say that, but we did make it out of there before it started hitting 90 and 100 degrees, and I never want to be in Arizona for that kind of weather. However, on our way back, while waiting to board the plane back to Detroit, I noticed a white-haired gentleman wearing a blazer walk up to, the boarding line where everybody was lining up to board the plane. And I had to do a triple take. I couldn't really believe my eyes. I said, no way, this can't be, right? Is it really him? And yeah, I could confirm finally the man was indeed former Michigan Republican Governor Rick Snyder. Now, mind you, we stood in line for about 2 minutes or so before he boarded the plane. And by the way, he did not sit in first class. He did sit in business class, which is fine. So, I guess, am I going to give him credit for that? Probably not. But while we stood there, my mind raced as I wondered, what question would I ask Rick Snyder if I had the chance? What would that one question be? Would it be, how could he justify signing a bill in his final week in office, a rushed-through bill to build an expensive tunnel around that 70-year-old Canadian oil pipeline under the Straits of Mackinac known as Line 5, thereby putting our Great Lakes and our economy in danger? No, that was one question. Or would it be, how could he, a so-called smart and big-time businessman nerd, miss the early signs of the Flint water crisis? And I'd like to know how he's living with himself as he flies comfortably in business class while his actions and inactions cause children to get poisoned, and not to mention the handful of citizens who died of Legionnaire's disease around the Flint area. Or would it be how Michiganders left in droves during his terms, or how he gutted public education, or how he championed corporate tax cuts and corporate welfare while the working class received little, or making the state a right-to-work for less state? Or would my question be, for all of his supposed disagreements with dear leader Trump and the MAGA movement, how could he do an about-face and quickly work with other elite and millionaire MAGA Michigan Republican donors to help put MAGA Republicans in control of the state house? I mean, these were all the questions that were just running through my head. But as I walked by him on the plane and he was sitting there alone listening to something, I thought, how wrong that felt to me watching him sit there comfortably on that plane. I mean, he was the former leader of Michigan whose actions led to one of the greatest man-made disasters of all time, costing the people of Flint their long-term health, costing the state of Michigan lots of money, and here he is. He gets to live out the rest of his life in the comforts of business class travel while never being held accountable for his actions. That really kind of did rub me the wrong way as we were boarding to sit with the rabble in the back of the plane. And we wonder why the working class in Michigan and around the country are raging mad at the elites, like Rick Snyder, who've brought us to this current state of ruin, who've brought us to this current state of fascism. Like the Epstein class that people like Rick Snyder truly represent, that class is the untouchable class, and they get to always walk between the raindrops. Meanwhile, those who peacefully protest the Trump regime's ICE Gestapo are killed in the streets and quickly forgotten by the corporate media, the same corporate media that applauds dear leader Trump because he gives them so much availability. They love that about him. Fascism, who cares? He'll talk to us. Sure, he talks out of his ass and is a felon, but golly gee, he gives the White House press corps access. And then you see why you're suddenly not hearing much about the Epstein files or ICE kidnappings, or why you're not hearing or seeing real anti-Iran war voices in corporate media whatsoever. And then it doesn't really take a genius to understand why so many Americans have tuned out cable news and are opting for podcasters and other independent media, like Michigan's premier progressive podcast. Left of Lansing is available on Patreon right now, and I'd like to invite you to visit the page. That's patreon.com/leftoflansing. You'll get a full archive of the show there, including Monday musings and the Friday shorts, but you'll also get some content exclusively available on Patreon. It's free to be a member, but you know what? If you like, you can drop off a cool $5 donation. Or even more, if you want to. I mean, I won't complain one bit. And I'd like to give a shout out to a loyal LOLer for donating to the show. Aaron, thanks so much for your donation and for signing up on the page. And thanks for recommending the show to family members, as you are really helping connect the progressive populism that we're pushing here on a weekly basis throughout Michigan and the rest of the country. So thank you, Aaron, for all of your kind words that you sent me. And thank you for your donation. Don't be a stranger. And for the rest of you out there, visit patreon.com/leftoflansing, and I'll provide links wherever you're listening to this podcast so you can visit that page as well. And if you donate, just like I did for Aaron, I'll always give you a shout out. Now, where are we? Oh, that's right. The Iran war is now in week 3. And as of this recording, gas prices are $3.99 per gallon in Gratiot County. And, it's because of this little war that Israel and the United States wanted to wage on Iran, a war of choice, a war that is needless, a war that didn't ever have to be fought. And I can't tell you what's happening because Dear Leader tells us in one moment that we've won the war. And then he tells us that we need regime change. And then he says we don't need regime change. And then he says there's an argument to be made that maybe Israel and the United States should have never even started the war in the first place. You think? In their efforts to hide the Epstein files, the Epstein Class is more than pleased to have this war taking up the headlines. So far, we've spent around $11 to $12 billion for this nice little war to please the Epstein Class, as well as Israel's maniacal and criminal Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been pushing for this war for the last 30 years, ever since I think I was in college. Remember, this is the same guy who cheered on George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, Don Rumsfeld, and all of the neocon war hawks to attack Saddam Hussein and Iraq back in 2003. And what happened with that little war? Yeah, we wasted nearly $1 trillion and lost 4,500 American lives and thousands of Iraqi lives, many of whom we claimed we were liberating. So now, here we are again with another Middle Eastern war against another country that posed zero zilch nada of a threat to the United States. It didn't pose a threat whatsoever. So far, 13 American lives have been lost, not to mention several more who've been injured. And I still don't know if we're getting a true accounting of those numbers. The Guardian reports some 1,500 Iranian lives have been lost. Remember, we are liberating them. But we, the taxpayers in this country, have shelled out somewhere between $11 and $12 billion. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather that money be spent here. I know, insane thinking, yeah. And economically speaking, since we as a state of Michigan and we as a country refuse to move on to the future in terms of public transportation or high-speed rail or even EV cars, this war for oil resources, and it's always about oil, right, is costing Americans. It's costing working-class Americans. Gas prices are rising again. Diesel prices are skyrocketing, which means truckers are paying more. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb here to predict that food companies are suddenly going to scale back prices for their products anytime soon. I mean, they didn't do that when gas prices were a little lower recently. And we learned this week that wholesale prices jumped 0.7% versus a 0.3% expectation, as economists and the Federal Reserve are blaming Dear Leader's insane tariff scheme as one of the main reasons for inflation rising. I mean, so much for Dear Leader ending inflation on day one. I mean, I really thought that was going to happen after he won the election, didn't you? Just like I really thought he cared about the working class, didn't you? That was never going to happen since he only works for one class, the Epstein Class. Because look, everyone, gas prices are rising fast due to the stupid war, and it's the working class that is paying the price. But here's what I don't get. I was told, and you were told, that deregulating Wall Street, providing massive corporate tax breaks, giving government handouts to the oil and gas industry would all lead to lower prices for we, the working class. I am stunned that all of those plans did not work out one bit to help the working class, aren't you? This is the K-shaped economy MAGA Michigan Republicans are celebrating and perpetuating, and they do it to serve their corporate billionaire Epstein MAGA donor class. This is why America is so much in a populist mood and why the working class is tired of being fleeced by the Epstein class. Coming up in a moment, our good friend here, Livingston County progressive fighter and union member Kasey Helton, will join us to talk about a bevy of topics on the local, state, and national political stage. But before Kasey joins us, I have to share some words and thoughts on Michigan Democratic State Representative Noah Arbit of West Bloomfield. Now, if you already checked out the Left of Lansing YouTube page this week, you'll notice I already recorded a little video short about Representative Arbit, but I'd like to expand and expound a little bit more here, if that's okay. Why am I asking you? I'm going to do it anyway. Representative Noah Arbit is very pro-right-wing Israeli government. Oh, does he love the right-wing Israeli government. And after the horrific attack on the synagogue preschool in West Bloomfield Township last week, rather than bring people together, Noah Arbit decided to go on a full attack mode against, no, not MAGA Republicans, but against some of his fellow Democrats, especially progressive Democrats, by literally blaming them for the attack there in West Bloomfield Township because he says they've been critical of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Actually, he could have gone, like I said, against the fascist MAGA movement and the Trump regime for coddling anti-Semites for years and years and years, including when dear leader Trump dined with a neo-Nazi podcaster a few years ago. But no, Democratic State Representative Noah Arbit took out his anger on a specific Democrat, one who happens to be of Arab descent and one who also happens to be running against the Epstein class, including billionaires in the state like the DeVos family. I mean, that's strange how that happens. Now, Democratic primary candidate for Michigan's open U.S. Senate seat and good friend of the show, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, released a statement right after that synagogue attack condemning it by saying there is no room for anti-Semitism in America. It seemed like the correct thing to say since the synagogue attack, that one was indeed an anti-Semitic attack since the attacker conflated and lumped together school children as the same as the corrupt and criminal Israeli right-wing government. Yeah, when you do things like that, that makes you anti-Semitic. But Democratic State Representative Noah Arbit went off on his fellow Democrat. Remember, this is a Democrat Noah Arbit is attacking when he released this statement, okay? And I'm going to read it to you because this is Noah Arbit responding to Dr. Abdul on Twitter saying, "Amazed by crocodile tears from someone who's done more than most to stoke and inflame hatred against Jews. It's a very small logical leap from AIPAC controls the U.S. government, Israel is committing genocide, Zionists kill Arab babies to kill Jews in West Bloomfield." Wow. I mean, first of all, it's amazing, how after Charleston, where right-wing dude bros chanted Jews will not replace us, and how anti-Semitic messages between young Republicans were recently revealed, it's just amazing to me that Noah Arbit can claim with a straight face that Dr. Abdul El-Sayed is the one who has done more than most to stoke and inflame hatred against Jews. He says more than most. Now wait, is Noah speaking for every Jewish American in his district? Or in Michigan, or in America? Because, Noah, when it comes to the right-wing Israeli government's genocide in Gaza, nearly 40% of American Jews believe that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in Gaza, according to a poll by the Washington Post last fall. 40%. That's 4 in 10, Noah. You really believe you're speaking for all American Jews? I mean, that seems presumptuous of Noah Arbit to claim that he speaks for all American Jews, doesn't it? And by making such a proclamation in which he conflates or combines American Jews with Israel, then Noah Arbit is the one guilty of perpetuating anti-Semitism, perhaps more than anyone else. See how I turned that one around there? But it's a logical step to take Strange that Noah Arbit isn't going after Mallory McMorrow, another U.S. Senate candidate in that Democratic primary race, since Mallory also called Israel's actions in Gaza to be a genocide. But he doesn't go after her. Now, I wonder why. Strange how that happens. Now, let me remind you, as I discussed in last week's Friday Short, an NPR PBS poll released last week shows that 56% of Americans are against this war of choice, while just 36% approve of Trump's and Netanyahu's war on Iran, and 55% see Iran as only a minor threat or no threat at all. The American people, the working class, is not stupid, Noah. And a new Zedio and DropSite News poll revealed last week how 52% of Americans, that's a pretty significant number, 52% of Americans believe this war was started to distract the public on dear leader Trump's relationship with the billionaire convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. But according to Noah Arbit, all of those Americans are anti-Semites. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed is a man of medicine who's been advocating Medicare for all in this country for years because this country sucks at caring for its own citizens. Do you really believe, Noah, that he'd wish harm on fellow Michiganders who he wants to give health care to? You really want to go down that route? Now, Dr. Abdul rightly called out Israel's right-wing government's genocide in Gaza, a genocide that we, the American taxpayer, helped perpetuate via billions of dollars in corrupt government aid and weapon sales to Israel's right-wing and corrupt genocidal government. And may I also remind you that the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Bibi Netanyahu over Israel's genocide in Gaza. Oh, but I'm sure the ICC is probably anti-Semitic too, right, Noah? Democratic State Representative Noah Arbit says any criticism of his dear right-wing Israeli government is an attack on all Jewish people and Jewish Americans. And I find that interesting. I really do find that interesting because he's been quite critical of the Trump regime many times this past year. Arbit even joined progressive Democratic State Representative Betsy Kafia in introducing a bill banning the ICE Gestapo from wearing masks. How dare you, Noah Arbit? How dare you? How dare you oppose your dear leader Trump in the American government? How dare you? Don't you know that by attacking the leaders in this country, you put American lives in danger overseas? Do you not understand the power of your words, Noah, and how they could lead to violence against Americans? I mean, that's your stance when it comes to anyone criticizing Israel. And then I found this tweet from March 7th of 2024, where Noah Arbit criticizes the Anti-Defamation League's Jonathan Greenblatt for hosting dear leader's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, at an ADL conference. And Noah Arbit put this up on Twitter. He said, "I am ashamed and disgusted at what Jonathan Greenblatt has made the ADL become. Stop carrying water for fascists." You son of a bitch. You are threatening the lives of Jews in Michigan and around the world by saying the Anti-Defamation League is carrying water for fascists. How dare you put lives in danger, Noah Arbit, with that kind of rhetoric? That's the kind of rhetoric we have to silence. Now, actually, the ADL is nothing but a right-wing Israeli government front whose mission is to silence dissent of anything Israel. Hence, the ADL stays away from MAGA anti-Semitism, but continuously goes after those speaking up for Palestinian rights. But there's Democratic State Representative Noah Arbit doing the exact same thing he's accusing others of doing. Noah, are you truly for this war on Iran? Dear leaders' war on Iran, the Trump regime's war on Iran, Israel's war on Iran, where Michiganders are paying more for gas, and Americans are paying billions of dollars already, and American lives have been lost because it's a war neocons in both Israel and America have wanted for years. Are you truly for this war? I mean, what about fighting for the working class in your district first and foremost, Noah? By the way, I have to mention this. Noah Arbit is currently working on legislation, according to Michigan Advance, to create an Office on Hate Crime and Extremist Violence Protection that would go within the executive branch of the state government. Really? So Noah Arbit wants to create some office within the governor's office whose job it will be to intimidate, arrest, or even incarcerate anyone who criticizes his dear Bibi Netanyahu? Is that Is that where we're going here, Noah? I mean, how do you feel about that, Michigan Democrats? Are you all about giving a governor that kind of power? And before you say, oh, yeah, sure, why not? I mean, Governor Whitmer's in now, and maybe a Democrat will get in next year, fine. But what happens? What happens if John James is your governor? Or what happens if Mike Duggan is your governor? You really want to give those guys that kind of power? The power that Noah Arbit wants to give the governor's office? You see, to people like Noah Arbit, it's all about government control over freedom of speech, especially freedom of speech against Israel. It's about government control over that kind of speech. Noah Arbit, like a good chunk of Democrats today, is out of touch with the entire Democratic base. And he's the one sounding more and more like someone who should just pack up and go work for the Trump regime because they would love a bill like that. Noah Arbit must be primaried in his district. Please, somebody step up and do it. You're listening to LOL.
A working class voice for the working class. It's Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. If you'd like to tell Pat what you think of the show and maybe even congratulate him for providing podcasting excellence, oh, brother. Email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. If you have an idea for a guest or a topic for a future show, email him at leftoflansing@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you for listening and for helping spread the progressive message in the Mitten State and beyond. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
As always, you can email me, leftoflansing@gmail.com, or leave your comments on my socials, or also on my Left of Lansing YouTube page. And as I've said before, I started this Left of Lansing page on Patreon. There's no more leftoflansing.com. So you can go there, become a member, check out the full archive of shows. Plus, I'm posting things there that are not normally on the podcast, the weekly podcast that you hear. So check us out over on Patreon. Okay, so it's been a few months since we've talked with the strong progressive activist from Livingston County known as Kasey Helton, and I've invited Kasey back on here on the show to share some of her keen insights on what's happening not only around her area, but across the state and around the nation's political landscape. You can find Kasey on her socials, especially I like following her on Instagram, but I know she does things on Twitter and elsewhere as well. So I'm grateful that she's been able to join us here once again here on This Week on Michigan's premier progressive podcast. Kasey, how are you doing?
Hi, Pat. As always, it is such a pleasure to be back on your podcast. I think the work that you do is just fantastic, and I'm doing great. Just, sticking in the fight. There's never a shortage of action to be done. So thank you for having me on to share a little bit of what I've been up to lately and my views on things.
Oh, no, of course. And thanks for your kind words as well. I didn't think it was possible because the last time we talked, Kasey, was just a couple months ago in November. And I guess I thought, well, could things really get worse since then? And yeah, I guess we can say they have gotten worse.
Yeah, the brink of World War III possibly is definitely in the classification of potentially, yes, worse. Yes, it just seems like everything is so unstable today. I know in our family, we are worried about the cost of fuel going up to their, I just read every day, you open up your phone now, there's folks that are like in the Trump administration or adjacent to the Trump administration talking about $200 a barrel for oil could drive up prices to up to $6.30 a gallon. Like, I'm a commuter. We can't afford that. I commute to Michigan Medicine in Ann Arbor from Howell every week so I can pay my bills. And, my husband's also a commuter. So that's something, we couldn't afford. And then you're looking at, I just posted on my Twitter the other day, the New York Times did a big piece about, and who could have really saw this coming, Pat? I don't know. Maybe you did. I know I did, but apparently other voters did not. Migrant work, it's disappearing because of all of these crackdowns. And now the Trump administration wants to intervene and pay farmers more to hire migrant workers. So they can continue to be exploited, and they're not going to come anyway because they know they're going to be deported. So I'm just really would love to know, where are we going to get our produce from this summer, and how much is it going to cost? These are the concerns that are on every American's mind right now as we're dealing with this boondoggle in Iran.
You bring up gas prices, and it reminds me, Kasey, of something I heard somebody talking about on Sirius Radio this past week. And they said how gas prices might actually wake those up, those voters or those Americans who might not be the most politically engaged and who have the blinders on because they have to deal with their day-to-day work. They have to pay the bills. They have to take care of their kids. So maybe they thought some of the things that are happening via the Trump regime, okay, that's happening to other people, but not to me or my family. However, now with rising gas prices out of nowhere because of this stupid Iran war, they're actually feeling the pain of the Trump regime's decisions. Now, I hate to think that it takes something like higher gas prices for some Americans out there to realize, hey, wait a second, I think I'm getting screwed here in this whole deal. But at the same time, I guess if that's what it takes, then fine. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there's different groups of people that would fit into that category. In terms of your hardline MAGA supporters, people, I know there's some in our community. These are your like 20% MAGA. They're like cattle. They're going to do whatever Trump says. They're like, it's like a cult, you know. I'm not the person to invent that phrase, but they're going to support Trump no matter what. They're the same people who are fine with Trump waging war with Iran, even though he specifically promised in several speeches that he would not go to war with Iran. And in fact, you should vote for him because he wouldn't go to war with Iran. And now they're saying that the war with Iran is great. So those people, no, I don't think it's going to have that much of a difference because it's a different mental process that's going on there. Mm-hmm. But for your average, I think independent voters, and I think for people who I think is a larger contingency, which is good news. I don't think they're going to be able to help but start asking questions, you know. And I said this to my husband when this all went down, when Trump was reelected. I said, and every day horrors would happen and we would be like, why aren't people rising up against this? But I would say to my husband, it's not bad enough yet. It's just not bad enough yet, but it is going to get bad. And when you're talking fuel, when you're talking groceries, these are essentials, Pat. These are things that if you're getting priced out of that, how can you not pay attention? And if they start paying attention when it just affects them and that motivates them to action, then I'm fine with that. I'm not going to give a lecture on that to anybody because everyone's views change over things. I know mine have over time.
I guess I'm at the point, whatever it takes. You know,
whatever it takes. Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Exactly. I'm not one of those people that like sits around. I don't judge people who like voted MAGA and then I don't do that. I'm not trying to pick a fight with people who do, but like we will welcome anybody who wants to fight against this regime in solidarity. We will welcome you. No judgment, at least from my perspective.
You know, Kasey, this whole Iran war now has got me experiencing some flashbacks to the run-up of the Iraq war some 20 plus years ago. I got politically engaged, really politically engaged, probably right around 9/11, if not right before. I was always interested in politics. I was interested in news. That's why I got into news talk radio when I got out of college. So that was always in my blood. But when I really started to open my eyes to how things were being done and to how certain Defense Department machinations, along with how our corporate media kind of work hand in hand with them, that all took place around 9/11 and after 9/11 when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were pushing the United States to get into the Iraq war. Now, there are differences between now and back then. And one of those things that is completely different is that a majority of Americans are not for this war on Iran, unlike what happened 20 plus years ago when the majority of America was for the Iraq war, at least at the very beginning. But if there's one thing that has kind of convinced me of something, because I was never completely on board with that thought that I think MAGA Republicans are different than your old school Republicans. I've been hearing that talk a lot for many years. I never completely bought into it, and maybe it was because of my radio jobs, and I got to hear how right-wing radio never changed before or after Donald Trump. Well, in regards to this war, Kasey, we got to see polls showing how MAGA, before the war started, wasn't completely on board with it. They didn't want to go to war with Iran. So they said, however, once dear leader and the Trump regime decided that, okay, it's time now to go to war on Iran, look at that. All of a sudden, all these MAGA Republicans are now marching step in step with the Trump regime and saying, yes, we now want to go to war with Iran. We need war against Iran. Go USA. It just seems like no matter what, there was no difference between MAGA and the George W. Bush, Dick Cheney neocon years of the Iraq war. Is that your take?
I think that's an accurate description. I sympathize with you because I was in that same boat. I'm a former Republican. I studied political science at a private Christian college when I was my freshman year of college, a school called Olivet Nazarene University in Kankakee, Illinois. And so that was eons ago, but I was part of that, up until, just like you said, like 9/11 is kind of when I started asking questions about this more into the war. What I'm observing is that the real shift isn't taking place among Republicans. The shift on the war and specifically on the Palestine issue is taking place among Democrats and independents. And unfortunately, like our politicians, Alyssa Slotkin specifically, like they're not keyed into that. So there was a tweet that I just read this morning. New NBC News poll finds American public sentiment turning against Israel since 2023. Double-digit drops in positive views of Israel. -21 among Democrats. -19 among independents. -9 among Republicans. So Republicans are, this is per NBC News poll. So Republicans are not very much. The shift is within our own party. And you cannot separate the Palestine issue from what is going on in Iran. They are all linked.
This is something that, Kasey, isn't going to change. The numbers are going to continue, I think, on the Democratic side and with independents. And those numbers are only going to get worse and worse for those who want to continue to defend the genocidal and corrupt right-wing Israeli government.
If I could just make it perfectly clear, I want to be very, very candid about this. This is not an issue of anti-Semitism, which I get very prickly and resentful when anybody questions the actions of Israel, this incursion of Israel on Palestine, Iran, now Lebanon. You're accused of being an anti-Semite. Like when I mentioned when I was growing up and I was in Christian college and even through in elementary school, being an evangelical, you are taught to respect your Jewish brethren. Mm-hmm. And there is a very strong emphasis on Israel being the promised land. And a lot of it is kind of twisted and it's self-serving into the Christian side of things because of Christian dogma, which I won't go into all of that. Some of it gets very deep in the weeds and messed up. So, but a lot of that early upbringing did inform some of my earlier opinions about what was going on after October 7th. Like my views on that changed a lot and it took time. It took a lot of time. Like I mentioned in a social media post that I just did a couple days ago that kind of got a lot of traction about Alyssa Slotkin. Like I mentioned, I came into the Palestine issue late and I'm embarrassed by that. And I know I'm not the only one who has done that, who identifies a person who considers themselves a Democrat, considers themselves a progressive. It took a while, but I think more and more Democrats are doing that. They're seeing what's right in front of their eyes, that this is a harmful regime over in Israel. What they're doing is completely over the top and it needs to be reined in for sure. And, that needs to be called a genocide in Palestine because that's what it is.
And it drives me so upset because nobody is saying that every Jewish person in the world, every Jewish American is to blame for what Benjamin Netanyahu and his government did in Gaza. No, we are criticizing the government of Israel and its actions in Gaza, and we don't believe that the Democratic Party should be supporting such actions. I don't know why that is so hard for some people to understand, like you said, when it comes to politicians like Alyssa Slotkin, for instance.
Yes. And there are many Jewish people here in the United States. I have friends of mine that are Jewish that take very deep issue with being linked here in America to Zionism over in Israel. And they feel like it makes them less safe over here. So, I think that more of our politicians on the Democratic side need to study their rhetoric and start listening to the people on this and not the money and who's paying them.
And you know what? That has changed, I think, completely in maybe the last 5 or 6 years, too. I think you're seeing a lot of Democratic voters paying attention to certain political action committees and maybe those that have pro-right-wing Israeli views who are saying, and we'll say like AIPAC, for instance, like AIPAC. And I think that Democratic voters are now paying attention to which lobbyists are contributing or bribing certain politicians with their cash. I think that's a good thing. I think it is a good thing that Democratic voters are really in tune now to see where AIPAC is spending its money, which candidates AIPAC is supporting. I think that's a good thing, and I think that's going to help strengthen the Democratic Party in the future.
I think it is too. There's a saying in politics, it's as old as politics itself, and that is follow the money. Always follow the money. There's a reason money is the great incentivizer. Capital is the great incentivizer. And I think Democratic voters expect and demand better of their leadership, and they're not seeing it in all of the leaders. You look at Schumer, you look at Jeffries, you look at Alyssa Slotkin out here in Michigan. This is not what we elected her to do. We didn't elect her to give us technical lectures on what's going on in Iran, like I'm seeing on her Twitter all the time. It's informative, but what people want is vision. What they want expressed is vision. What are the Democrats going to do that is different than what MAGA is doing, than what Trump is doing? It should not be that hard 2 terms in to articulate that. And yet here we are.
Yeah, I was going to say, yet it seems like it is difficult for some. Melissa Slotkin. Okay, so like you said, she's been, I wouldn't say that she's been pro-Iran war, that she was calling for this, but it seems like a lot of her criticisms ever since the bombing started, it seems like her criticisms are more about procedure. Oh, they didn't go through Congress. They didn't make their case to us. Rather than just saying, being black and white and just saying, no, this is wrong, and I'm not going to fund it. But then we had last week, I think it was in Politico, where they asked Melissa Slotkin, okay, well, the war started. What are you going to do when it comes to funding? And she said, well, we're in it. Which sounds to me that she's going to give in and do whatever, vote for whatever funding they want.
She might not. I guess that remains to be seen. I know when she was in the House, and it was pointed out to me, I follow Joe Spalding on Twitter too, and he did make a post about how, when she was in the House, she did take a stand against that, and hopefully she will.
Hopefully.
But like you brought up, Pat, is this really about procedural? Is this really what's driving this 21% number? Procedure? Can we honestly say that? I don't think that it is. I think this is deeper than that. These 21% disapproval with Israel, I think people are starting to draw lines. They're starting to make connections about how politics actually works in Washington in terms of money, who's getting it and who isn't, and who's being represented and who isn't. And that is, I think, thanks to AIPAC. So thank you, AIPAC, for helping us track that. But you're just seeing a direct line. I mean, you're seeing the politicians who are paid by AIPAC are the politicians who have watered down messages on Israel, on this war, on Palestine, and the politicians that are speaking out against the war, that are speaking out against eternal wars, in the United States, are not taking AIPAC money. People, they're smart enough to understand that. You don't need to have a political science degree to see what's going on there.
Well, as for Alyssa Slotkin, I think she could take a real easy track here. Same with Gary Peters, the outgoing senator here in Michigan. I think it's a real easy track that they could go down here to voting for extra funding on this illegal war. And that track, in my opinion, is, look, I didn't want this in the first place. The American people don't want this in the first place. It's not defunding the troops. It's we're bringing them back home. I think that would be such a winning message. I don't understand why that's not being taken by some of them.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying it.
Yeah, that's sad. That's sad.
You know what? We can't have that, Pat.
No.
We cannot have Marge being the one who supports Tucker Carlson, who is, I'm convinced, is going to run for president. And that would be fascism on steroids. They cannot be the one being the voice on the Palestine issue for the common people. Democrats have got to, we've got to right this ship, man. Like the clock is ticking. You know what I mean? We don't have unlimited chances at this. And I see missed opportunity everywhere. It's stressing me out, man.
And that's, I think stress, sadly, I do think that stress is one of the goals that the Trump regime is pushing on people. It wants to always flood the zone with all kinds of news, and it wants to add stress to people and make them almost tune out. Thankfully, though, we are seeing across the country when it comes to these ICE, and I call them concentration camps. You don't have to do that, but I call them concentration camps. I know others call them detention centers. But you are seeing people around the country come together and fight against those concentration camps from being set up in their own neighborhoods, in their communities. Kind of like what we're seeing with the tech bro billionaire data centers that are popping up around the country. Well, you're seeing people in communities, people who don't agree sometimes on politics. You're seeing people from the left and the right, from the working class, coming together and fighting back against these billionaires and against the corruption in government to say, no, we don't want these data centers here, at least not right now until we learn more about them. Well, I think we're also seeing that in terms of these concentration camps. And while it is depressing to see hardly any Democratic leaders push back against ICE and push back against these concentration camps, I felt somewhat, I don't want to say relieved, but I felt galvanized and I felt reassured that there are many Americans and many Michiganders who are going to fight against this kind of fascism, and they are going to fight against these concentration camps like we're seeing in Romulus, for instance.
I hope I don't sound too cynical on this, because the truth is, Pat, I have hope everywhere all the time. And the hope, and this is what I would tell people out here who are listening to your show, hope is in our people. It's in solidarity. It's in building that solidarity. Sitting on the phone and doom scrolling for hours at a time is, I know a lot of people's way of, they think that that's how you cope, but it is actually harmful to do that. And the thing that you should do and can do is find a community. And this is what we saw in Minneapolis. What happened in Minneapolis with ICE was organic. It was almost spiritual in a sense. Like, it fed my soul in a way. You know what I mean? I don't go to church anymore, Pat. I grew up in church. It felt that way, kind of. It felt to watch people in Minneapolis get together as neighbors and fight for, just be there for each other. I think it does give me hope. And I would encourage everyone to find some community. Go to a No Kings, find your local, if you're in a community that's got mutual aid, and a lot of communities are developing them. Even in small towns, even in Howell, we've got a mutual aid group. Stand Against Extremism Livingston County is a mutual aid group that you can sign up and be a part of. I haven't had time to do as much with them because I've been doing a lot of union stuff, but they're a great group. If you have something like that in your community, start there. Meet your neighbors. Take a cue from Minneapolis, for sure. They taught us well. They're teaching us everywhere.
You're right. I mean, you are right. What we saw in Minneapolis, like you said, was organic. It was a people-powered protest movement. They didn't sit around and wait for political leaders to guide the way, to show them the way or anything like that. They actually forced some change. They were the ones making the news. They were the ones fighting for good old-fashioned American values. And if there was some good that came out of what happened in those tragedies in Minneapolis, I'd like to think it's how the people stood up for themselves. And like you said, stood up for their neighbors. Kasey, before we move on, I think this would be a good point here in our discussion to talk about something I know you wanted to bring up, which was a movement called De-Ice These Flights. Can you talk more about that, please, and share it with everybody?
Yes, thank you. I'm here speaking as myself. I'm not here speaking as a union representative for Service Employees International Union. I just want to be really straightforward about that, first of all. But I am a part of Service Employees International Union, Healthcare Michigan. So we're a close to 4,000 member local out at U of M Hospital. And SEIU is a very large union. We have like 2 million members, I think, worldwide. And we are doing a campaign called De-Ice These Flights. It kicks off March 19th, I believe. And I was interviewed by Bloomberg News actually a couple of days ago with some of the heads of our national and also the leader of the Duke Student Union, who was also SEIU. Mm-hmm. We are using March Madness as a kickoff for this campaign because the issue of charter flights to shuttle around teams for March Madness to do the tournament. And so this campaign will direct you to a website where anyone can log in and sign a letter to the CEOs of these charter flights. The specific flights are Global X Air, Eastern Airlines, Omni International, and Transport Services Incorporated to cut ties with ICE deportations, because we want to make sure this letter is to those CEOs. And then also we want to let our universities know that we do not want them to contract with any of these charter companies anywhere that make money from cruelty by transporting detainees to ICE facilities. So we already have 8,000 signatures, I believe. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get as many as we can. If you post it on your podcast website, it'll have a link to the letter to the CEOs that you can read, and you can sign the letter as well and have it sent to those CEOs to just let them know that we don't want hate mixed in with our sports. Anytime where you have people making money off of cruelty, that needs to be called out. And that's essentially what this campaign is about.
No, I love that. And what I like the most about it is how it's calling out those who are profiting from cruelty. That's what I like most about it. So I will make sure to provide a link wherever anybody is listening to this podcast. I'll provide that De-Ice the Plane link so that way you can add your signatures. So that way the CEOs, or at least the companies, understand that we are watching them and we know that they're profiting from this cruelty. Finally, and we only just have a few moments left here, Kasey, I wanted just to ask you about a couple of election races that are coming up later on here this year. One of those races is the 7th Congressional District, which I believe that you're in, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. And in that race, we have, it's really a three-way race between two corporate-backed establishment Democrats and one very progressive and, I have to tell you, one very pro-working class Democrat. But then the other race I quickly would like to go over is the Democratic primary race for the U.S. Senate seat between the corporate establishment candidate, Haley Stevens, the working class progressive candidate, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, and then there's State Senator Mallory McMorrow, who's trying to kind of play it right down the middle in between of both of those candidates. So I was just wondering if I could get your takes on both those races, what you'll be looking for in those races.
There's so much happening in terms of these races, and I'm speaking both, like, as you mentioned, our local congressional race here in the 7th, and then also the Senate race statewide. So in our congressional district, which used to be Alyssa Slotkin's district, now when she was a congresswoman, now it's Tom Barrett, who is, awful. And then we have 3 candidates who are running on the Democratic side for the nomination. Mm-hmm. So you've got William Lawrence, who is a progressive candidate. He comes from the Sunrise, oh boy.
I think the Sunrise Movement. I think that's what you're searching for.
He came up through climate activism, and his father was a professor at Michigan State in constitutional law, and he's retired now. And William's been around here in Michigan for many years doing activism. And then you've got Bridget Brink. She's a former Ukrainian ambassador. And then you've got Matt Masdam, who is a very much kind of an Alyssa Slotkin type character, and he's a Marine, and he loves to talk about how he carried the nuclear football. And I mean, I don't know, I guess that impresses some people, but that's not the main thing I look for in a candidate. That's my thought. But so I'm going to be supporting William Lawrence with my vote.
Who I will be having on the show next week.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Oh, I'm so excited about that. He's great. I've met him before. He rung me up personally when he first launched his campaign just to meet for coffee and ask me, like, what are some of the issues in Livingston County that residents are concerned about? What can I do to speak to them? And so that's what's happening there. But you're seeing a similar dynamic play out in the Senate race. Like, you're seeing this everywhere. In the Senate race, you got Mallory McMorrow, you got Abdul El-Sayed, and you've got Haley Stevens, and they're all kind of on that similar wavelength where I think Abdul is your leftist progressive candidate. You got Mallory McMorrow kind of in the middle, and then you've got Stevens, who is really, I know she's a Democrat, but like, in my opinion, she's like more of right wing, because this Overton window that's always shifting, right?
AIPAC bought.
AIPAC, exactly. So I'm voting for Abdul. He has my vote. Abdul, I'm a member of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation. We have not done endorsements yet. I'm not saying that they have endorsed them, but what I did want to mention, rather, is that Abdul personally reached out to our small labor federation, no press, just a one-on-one. And he reached out to us to talk to us about labor issues, our issues that affected our locals, and what he would do to address that. And that impressed me. You know what I mean? That's not the kind of thing that's going to get press coverage. It's not a UAW rally, but it's a small group of very dedicated labor leaders, labor activists who work hard every day to affect change in their workers, their fellow union brothers and sisters' lives. And here's Abdul El-Sayed saying, I want to come talk to you, on your weeknight. And he did. He spoke, the thing that he said that really appealed to me is that he spoke of the need for Democrats to have a vision. The vision comes first, then the policies. You have to paint a picture for voters. You can't poll test it. You can't craft it in a press release with some consultant. This is something that has to happen organically from your view of the world and your ability to express how you are going to make change. That's what voters want to hear right now. They don't want to hear sound bites, and they don't want to hear poll-tested messaging. They just, want realness. And I really got that from Abdul. So that's why I'm going to be voting. I'm just voting progressive, all the way down the line.
And I have to just tell you, that's why I announced here that I was backing Dr. Abdul, because he is providing a vision, a working class vision. And I think it's a vision that has been lacking within Democratic Party circles for the last 30 or 40 years. There's a reason why his campaign is resonating with so many, and it's because he is focusing on the people, on the working class who are feeling left behind.
Yeah, he's had that vision and has expressed that vision for years.
Yes.
And I know that Mallory did have that viral Twitter moment that got her the call from President Biden, and I loved it. I thought it was great when it happened.
Me too.
But sometimes I wonder, if the way she comes across is somewhat kind of crafted in a way. I don't know. I'm not saying I wouldn't vote for Mallory McMorrow. I definitely would. I don't think I would vote for Stevens, because I don't think we'd see much of a difference, to be honest with you, between her and whoever her Republican opponent is. I don't.
Sadly.
I don't. This is hard to say, but I really am excited to vote for Abdul El-Sayed. I think Dr. Abdul.
Doctor.
As my husband said, Doctor. Yes.
Well, listen, Kasey, thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything. Keep up the good fight. And like I said, people can find you on the socials, right?
Yes. Kasey Helton 05 is my Twitter handle.
Okay.
And then also, Instagram and Facebook for sure. Just Google me.
Okay. Maybe I'll share some of those links on there too. So
thank you.
All right. Listen, we'll talk to you in a few months. Thanks again for being on again.
Thanks, Pat. It's always a pleasure. Have a great week.
You're listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing is now on Patreon. You can check out a complete archive of the show and other stellar content Pat doesn't share on the show. Visit patreon.com/Left of Lansing. Become a member for free. But we won't be upset if you drop off a $5 donation when you visit. At the very least, it will help Pat pick up the bill the next time we meet up for lunch. I think I deserve it. And now you deserve more Left of Lansing.
Hey, special thanks to my good friend and progressive fighter, Kasey Helton, for talking with us again here on Left of Lansing. Like I said, I will provide a link to that Keep March Madness Free from Deportation Flights petition. It's always important for all of us to let corporations know that we're on to them and to the role that they played in perpetuating fascism in America. And don't forget to vote on this week's Left of Lansing poll. Do you want Michigan's primary moved from August to May? The Senate Elections and Ethics Committee passed a bill that would make it law to move Michigan's primary to May, and it received bipartisan support. So I would love to see your reaction, and then I'll provide my reaction to your vote. You can vote on a few places, either on Left of Lansing's Twitter page, or the YouTube page, or on Left of Lansing's Patreon page. I'll keep the vote going through Wednesday of next week, and then we'll talk about it next week. Time now for the Left of Lansing Last Call. Let's just shine a little light on the Republican candidate for Michigan's U.S. Senate seat, Florida Mike Rogers, who's got the backing of dear leader Trump in his second bid in 2 years to win a Michigan Senate seat. Now, I need to highlight this story because I think it's pretty important, and it's from Ben Solis of Michigan Advance in an article titled, "Big Investors, Banking Industry Figures Gave Millions to Mike Rogers Over a Decade in Politics." And in that story, we learn, as Ben Solis reports, how a year-end FEC report for Rogers' 2026 campaign committee, combined with his joint fundraising committee and his Great Lakes Conservative Fund Super Political Action Committee, raised $817,000 to support the candidate's senatorial ambitions. Of that money, says Ben Solis, his principal campaign committee and joint fundraising committees collected $62,000 from banking industry donors. And between October and December of last year, FEC reports showed that the Rogers for Senate Committee received $32,000 from a mixture of banking-related PACs and individual donors involved in the financial sector. Oh, that really seems, neat for Florida Mike Rogers, who's also received loads of cash while in Congress. According to Open Secrets, Rogers received $1.25 million from the securities and investment industry throughout his career in the U.S. House. And when he was a Michigan state senator, Florida Mike played a key role in passing a bill that eliminated credit card interest rate caps here in Michigan. Oh, Mike, that was really awesome of you. I mean, that was you looking out for the working class, wasn't it? And then when he was in Congress, Mike Rogers voted against the Consumer Protection Bureau. One of the few good things to come out of the financial disaster of 2008. I mean, that his banking buddies and his banking benefactors told him, hey, don't you dare vote for that. And of course, last year, dear leader Trump and Elon Musk essentially gutted the Consumer Protection Bureau because, again, they really care about you, the working class. Now, I'm telling you this because Florida Mike Rogers isn't keeping it a secret that if he were to win that U.S. Senate race this fall, he wants to be on the Senate's Banking Committee, which oversees the banking and financial sector. Mike Rogers. He's used government to make himself rich as a lobbyist, and now he'll ensure that his big money banking lobbyist friends are taken care of first and foremost if he gets that seat on the Banking Committee in the Senate. Hey, but what else did you expect from Florida Mike Rogers? Just because he left Florida didn't mean he ever left the swamp.
You're listening to Left of Lansing. Music for the show and everything else on Left of Lansing is provided by Wanderbeats. To hear the latest project and complete music archives, check out Space Leopard on your favorite streaming site or subscribe to Space Leopard on YouTube. Now, back to our favorite progressive voice in Michigan. It's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of The Left of Lansing. Special thanks again to Kasey Helton for joining us. And as you heard me mention during our talk, progressive congressional candidate for Michigan's 7th Congressional District, William Lawrence, will return to the show. William, of course, is running in a Democratic primary where the establishment is against him, but that's because he's the only one saying no to the Iran war and yes to helping the working class in his district through progressive populism. And coming up on Saturday, March 28th, it's the third installment of the No Kings rally, and there are several rallies scheduled to take place all around the state, so we'll talk about that more next week as well. Oh, also, it's Oberon Day next week. Hey, look, I'm sorry, but I have to take the small pleasantries in life right now, and make sure that you do the same. Whatever gives you a little happiness, please make sure you do it, or else we will all go mad in these times. Until next time, remember, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan!
You've been listening to Left of Lansing with Pat Johnston. Left of Lansing was produced by Pat Johnston, brainstormed by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and yes, hosted by Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. Thanks to our good friend Rich for website assistance, and thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. We thank Audio Boom for publishing the podcast every week. Visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to Michigan's premier progressive podcast, and we'll talk with you again next week.